This is where they're trying to split a hair now. Instead of really coming out talking about it, now the corporate media has to pick it up because it's too all-encompassing across social media for them not to touch it. Adapt 2030 Mini Ice Age Conversations covers changes in our climate due to a new and intensifying grand solar minimum. In the media, overlooking, downplaying, or burying cold weather changes occurring on our planet. This is in order to keep the global warming agenda steaming full speed ahead. I do this podcast and radio program because we need to begin conversations on how to adapt our food growing strategies long before 2030 as agricultural zones shift, affecting global crop output, but very few mainstream media outlets are talking about the most important issue of our time: cold weather crop losses. Our sun is going through a 400-year cycle, which has effects on our weather patterns as our magnetosphere weakens and the jet streams go out of flow. It's not CO2, it's not you, it's the sun. Are you ready to thrive in the grand solar minimum? Then join me for Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne. And welcome back to the second hour of Mini Ice Age Conversations. I'm your host, David DuByne, creator of the Adapt 2030 channel on YouTube, as well as this podcast and radio series, Mini Ice Age Conversations, discussing entry into the grand solar minimum and how you can keep your family safe and grand solar minimum climate prepared with your communities. I did want to touch on quickly here, down here to Australia, down to Brisbane, they had a half a year worth of rain in 1 hour. But here's the interesting thing. Instead of calling it the record most recorded rain, because they haven't had anything higher than these totals apparently, hasn't happened before in Brisbane. Again, we come back to the stability. Now this is a major story here, but they have to report it, obviously, because when you cover a major city in Australia in water feet deep where it paralyzes the city and tens of thousands, if not 100,000 people without power, it is a major story for the country. Now the stability comes back in here. Now this is a massive, massive storm here. 30,000, this is the initial reports, right in the very first hour of this storm happening. 30,000 households without electricity. Again, all this incredible rain, 208,000 lightning strikes alone. So the power outages are going to be way higher than that. If you got that many lightning strikes, for sure, some of them are hitting poles, transformers. They're going for metal. The lightning strikes are going to hit some sort of infrastructure for sure. I don't care where it is, but that many lightning strikes coming over a small area, it's going to be hitting a lot of stuff. Trees are falling down on the lines. But the stability thing here, instead of calling it what it was, the record rainfall for the area that's never been seen before, that much rain coming down. You know how they phrased it? One of the highest 24-hour rain totals in the last 20 years. But then I read through the article, they never tell you when the other high rainfall events were because they don't want you to compare. Because when they're looking at other types of high rainfall areas, it would be something around like half an inch or a full inch, not 4 inches. But I love how they put the stability headline in there. It's right in the very first paragraph too. So you go, oh, one of the highest 24-hour rainfall totals in 20 years. Okay, cool. It must not be too weird of an event. It's a 20-year thing, so it must not be too strange. But if you read behind the lines, read into the gray area, it smashed every record recorded for rainfall in Brisbane. There was big, huge record rainfalls, which was the previous record 20 years ago. But this one smashed through it exponentially, but they don't really tell you that. See, this perception of stability, the way things are worded in the corporate media, because this is another sign that things are changing in our atmosphere. Another atmospheric compression event happened right here. And then also, I was reading about this intense blizzard coming through Iceland. And again, this is another atmospheric anomaly, strange as can be. And I thought, oh, okay, the way it was worded, it was like, oh, there's a blizzard forecast for Iceland. And I said, oh, they do get snow, but they're surrounded by the water, so it could be cold at times. They do get a couple storms come through. But overall, Iceland's not getting nearly as much snow as like Newfoundland or somewhere like this. They're not getting nearly as much snow as like a snow belt place like Buffalo, New York or something. And speaking of cycles, my new book with my co-author Bill Porter, Climate Revolution, a must-read for understanding our sun-driven climate. As we progress deeper into this new Eddy grand solar minimum, weather extremes leading to global food scarcity and higher food prices are here now. This book describes the expected changes, how to survive and thrive during future challenging times, and also practical preparations. The entire book is interactive with over 250 links, so you can click and go out to the scientific aspect of what we're talking about with the repeating cycles in this grand solar minimum. The science is explained so you understand the mechanisms. The solutions are there because we know we're going to face these exact same problems again that were faced in the Maunder minimum, the Sporer minimum, the Wolf minimum. Find designs for building greenhouses, grow guides, beam soil techniques, as well as bioreactors to create your own growth hormones for the soil. Available now, the new Adapt 2030 Climate Revolution. The link's in the description box below. The amount of snowfall in Iceland, for all its ice name, is not really as great as you would think it would be, believe it or not. It's just because around the ocean they're so blessed with that ocean current and the way systems move through. You know, with Iceland, you're probably thinking like 100 or 200 feet of snow per year, right? That's kind of the general thought of Iceland. Like, man, they're buried in ice. So when I said a bomb cyclone, like a blizzard coming, I thought, well, that's pretty interesting. I want to check it out. I really love looking at pictures of Iceland anyway, because you get these most majestic photos. Like after these storms pass through and they blast like a mountainside along the coast, people go out because it's really clear after the storms. And you get a lot of photographers, that's what they do in Iceland. They take photos. It's so beautiful up there. Shout out to Iceland. But I've seen some incredible photos in the sunlight, after the snow, and you know the mountains are all made of ash in some areas. It's all black, and then you got the pristine white snow, and you got really glowing sunset on rippling waters. Incredible photos, just incredible after these storms. So I'm a fan of looking for these photos. So I thought, all right, what's going to happen there? I want to check out and see if anybody's going to capture after the storm, after it's clean, after the weather's clear, and then we can see what kind of snow dump there was. This was a Category 3 ice hurricane. And the mainstream media didn't want to pick it up because A, it is an atmospheric anomaly to the uber, where there was so much snow that fell, 7 feet of snow. That's 4 times their total snowfall for the entire year in a single storm. Secondly, the wind was blowing on the gust at 150 miles per hour. Average sustained winds at 120. Miles per hour, not kilometers per hour, miles per hour. Category 3 hurricane, they call it an Icecane or a Snowcane. This is kind of some of the new lexicon or verbiage that's being used to describe the event. But because it was so all devastating for that island, not a single road was passable. Not one was passable after this storm. They were buried and still are buried. We're talking about Reykjavik, 5'4", 3-foot deep snow, and then the drifts were something like 20, 30 feet deep in some places, burying office buildings. You got to see some of this. When I looked, I was like, what is that? That's a city? It looks like it's like an icy scape that you would see, you know, on a polar surface with buildings sticking out of the ice. Otherwise, everything's covered in it. You can't see any buildings or cars. They're covered. Doorways, you look at some of these doorway pictures and you're like, how are they going to get out of there? And when they do get out, there's no roads open. How are they even going to get supplies? This was so far out of the ordinary. Again, with this Brisbane storm, okay, yeah, they got half a year's rain in an hour. That's like, wow, spectacular. But 150 mile per hour gusting Category 3 ice hurricane is something to behold in itself. The way the trees were all bent over, I haven't seen anything like that. I've seen stuff similar in Slovakia when you get this, it's like real heavy, they call it like concrete snow. I forget the exact term for it. It's like rife or something like this. It's heavy, wet snow that's blasted by heavy wind, usually 60, 80 mile per hour winds, and then when it cakes on something, it cakes over and the trees bend over. And then once the front passes, that snow starts to freeze and solidify, and they call it concrete snow. Like shockcrete snow. Okay, they get this in Slovenia, but this year they had it in Algeria also, which is strange to get that kind of like shockcrete, they call concrete snow, down in Algeria, a bit weird. So back to Iceland. 200 centimeters of snow in the north part of the island, and 100 centimeters of snow all over the entire island. So at the very minimum, anywhere recorded so far has been 3 feet. That is the lowest amount of snow that anywhere is recorded so far after this storm. The higher totals that they're getting in the northwest part of the island are 200 centimeters. 6 to 7 feet of snow in a single dump here. Now, you know, most of the populated areas are down in the south and a little bit west where the ports are. So Reykjavik and all these kind of things, a little bit, you know, on the further south part of the island. No corporate media picked up on this story. You know where all this information's coming from? Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Instagram stories, Periscope, YouTube Live. And this is real. This is where citizen journalism comes in, because the corporate media doesn't have a way to spin this one. Like they can spin the Brisbane rainfall and say, oh yeah, it's the most rainfall that we've seen in the last 20 years. Great, there was a bigger storm. That's a good way to mask it, easy. But there's nothing even comparable that's ever hit our planet that's been like this. Pretty much. A Category 3 ice hurricane. There's been a lot of nor'easters and a lot of bombogenesis and, you know, these kind of heavy wind storms or whatnot. But even at the height of some of these bombogenesis, they're not pushing more than, 90 or 100 miles per hour on the gusts. This hurricane, Category 3 ice hurricane, sustained winds at 120 with gusts to 150. And even in these bomb cyclones that you've seen roll across the United States over the last decade, they were not too common, these bombogenesis. 2015 is when I really started to hear about it. You did too. I mean, it was in the books, but they had to dust off books to find what this proper term to call these. It was called a nor'easter. But because they were coming out of season, and nor'easters only occur in certain seasons, in certain quadrants of our ocean off the east coast of the United States and Canada, there were a lot of these storms that were happening outside the regular periphery of the institutional definition of a nor'easter. So then, dusting off the history books, they started to find these bombogenesis things starting in 1940. They had a couple in 1950. They had, several in 1960. A lot in 1970, and then nothing for like 40 years. You might have spackled one in per decade. But now the bombogenesis is back, and we're getting it year after year after year after year again, very similar to the 1970s. But there's nothing in the historical reference, except maybe if we go way back 200 years ago, or way back 400 years ago, or way back 2,000 years ago, to find something that's similar to what we just saw here that the corporate media won't touch about Iceland. There's no way for them to quantify it except to say it needs its own new category. A, Iceland broke every snow record that they've ever had during this storm. Monthly totals, daily totals, seasonal totals. They smashed the records out of this thing. Secondly, it broke every record ever known for wind speed totals in this month. Now the conjecture is it 153 miles per hour on the gust, or was it 152 miles per hour on the gust? This is where they're trying to split a hair now. Instead of really coming out talking about it, now the corporate media has to pick it up because it's too all-encompassing across social media for them not to touch it. And how prepared are you for the transition into the grand solar minimum? Are you prepared for emergencies? Our friends at My Patriot Supply do have emergency survival food, the 2-week grab-and-go food crate or the 4-week food supply. They also have water filtration and items that you can use yourself to get ready to pack, such as Mylar bags, oxygen packs, things you can use for your own long-term food storage, and a host of different survival items that you might not have thought about in your preparations. I found it really super interesting that it took social media first to bring it out to world attention before the corporate media would pick it up. And I highly encourage you, go look at the photos. You are going to be shocked at what you see. And then take a look more at the live streams when the storm was happening. It looked like anything that you see on any kind of hurricane that lands off the tropics. Florida, Caribbean, whatever, and you look at those wind gusts and we see the rain blowing, imagine that being pieces of ice flying through the air, and you'll get the exact same look, but it's all white. So do you see those sheets of rain coming down in hurricanes? Well, these were sheets of ice particles. So one of the problems they're finding is that it wasn't just snow that came down, it was blinding, packing ice. They're caked in concrete ice and snow up there. So to dig out and get the snowplows out, they're finding it a little more difficult to remove, even in Reykjavik, the snow than they would have anticipated because, well, it's a different composition of snow packed so heavily with such high wind. So this Category 3 hurricane, way up north in the Atlantic, unheard of. You can yip-yap all you want about, oh, with 100 miles an hour, that's still not Category 3 hurricane. They classified it Category 3. The storm trackers, go up to the cyclone tracker, put it at Category 3. Most bombogenesis and winter storms, etc., you might get a Cat 1 for a very short amount of time, but nothing like this. They need to put a new band, literally. And the snow totals, they need to add a whole new range total up. It's never been this deep. Wind speed and velocity, they have to put in a whole new band above, 20% above what the old high wind speeds were just to encompass this storm. So these are the kind of events that we're getting into right now. And again, the corporate media is all trying to get you to be complacent. Don't do anything. Don't prepare. I'm going to say corporate media and government and bank, they don't want you to shift your spending habits. See, this is the dangerous thing at the moment. I'm going to commend off some articles off Zero Hedge that'll blend right in here. So succinctly, like, wow, that does fit. But the perception of stability keeps the just-in-time delivery system functioning. The perception of stability and you continuing your regular spending habits and your regular routines keeps the banking system functional. If your perception of stability is shaken and you start to go buy more than you regularly do, okay, you're one person, two people, a neighborhood, a city. We see what happens during hurricanes. Shelves empty out in seconds or minutes or hours. But the rest of the country around it or the next state over, generally not too affected. I mean, some of these strange hurricanes that would roll through multiple states, multiple countries, whatever, multiple island chains. Okay, wherever the hurricane's going to touch, people are going to buy emergency supplies. But once you get outside that zone, the rest of the world's still functioning completely fine. And any kind of shortages, there might be extra at warehouses or in some sort of production facility that can be expedited and sent directly to that area. Outside the supply chain is like an emergency delivery, specialized delivery, extra delivery just for that spot. Fine. Happens all the time? Great. I'm glad we are that adept at being able to shift cargo that quickly to help emergency response. That's great. That's something we need right now. In this day and age, we need to be more interconnected than ever with our shipping, communications, response. And we are. We're at the apex of what we know the apex of. But we thought the same thing 20 years ago. We're at the apex. We looked back 20 years ago. We're like, oh, they were so inefficient. They were missing this. So look back in time when everybody thought they were the apex of whatever they were doing. Go back to the 1950s. Do you think our emergency response has shifted? Because in the 1950s, they thought they were the top of the top of the top of their response. They were nowhere close. And we look back and I feel, geez, they're the Stone Age back then. So everything is going to be shifting and we get better as we move along. The perception of stability on a global level is something entirely different. A regional disaster is roped off into that disaster area. Supplies get limited. Your perception of stability on a global level, because if the global supply chain locks up because everybody's buying 10 times more than they would. So imagine just a thought experiment here. Everybody in the entire United States goes to stores, Home Depots, wherever it is, and they buy 5 times more than they normally buy. And they buy some items that they would normally buy, like seeds, tools, garden tools, shovels, generators, solar panels, water filters. These one-off kind of items that people would buy. Everybody goes to buy one. But when they go supermarket shopping, everybody buys 5 times more than they regularly buy. Everything would run out of every store and everything across the United States within a couple days. Literally. Bed Bath & Beyond, where you could probably get the jars there for canning, so that whole section would run out. long-term food. The vacuum packers, these kind of things that you can, pack your own zzz, and it pulls the air out of the bags. All that stuff would be gone, but the little scented candlesticks will probably still be there. Our supply chains will completely lock up and break down if everybody's perception of reality, of stability, stopped in the same days, weeks, or months, and they all went to buy everything. Everything would just lock up. There would not be enough in the supply chain to satiate everybody's need, because we all have enough money to buy stuff. And I'm wondering in places like Malawi, where they don't have that much money, if their perception of stability was like, oh, it's going to get way worse than the wars and everything. We're going to get down into like a full-on global weather system shift that's going to be way beyond what any war was. Oh my gosh, what do I need to buy? So that's what I'm curious about. If you're in Malawi listening today, or Mozambique, or Tanzania, could be in the Congo. Hey, shout out to the Congo listeners. If you're there, I would really, really love to know what your perception of stability would be and what you would buy the first things if you knew our global economy was going to shatter and stop on a dime, and what you would consider the most important items to buy out of your supermarkets or traders over there in Africa first if you had the money, because I think it would be very, very different than us in the United States, what we would go consider to buy first. Oh, hygiene's another one, please. I can't harp on this enough. Hygiene. If you're going to go to a store and everybody's fighting for canned food, whatever, that is a signal that you need to go buy all the bleach. Because without hygiene, you're going to die anyway. You're going to get sick and die faster than without food. If you get sick and you cut yourself and you're not healing your body and you're getting dysentery, you're going to die way faster than without food. So forget the food. Everybody's like kicking each other in the shins to get the food. Go for the bleach. That'll be tradable for food. That's one thing they found in the Year from Hell in the Bosnian War account. The siege that occurred during that time was just bizarre and unbelievable. For a year and a half, nobody got any supplies in or out. But what they found was bleach was a tradable because it could purify water. It could be used to disinfect. It could be put straight on wounds. I know it stings, and I know you go, what? Would you put chlorine bleach on your wound? Yes, because they had nothing else to put on to stop any kind of bacterial infection. You got to realize the kind of world they lived in was nothing we've ever experienced, ever. They were pouring boiling water on their fingers to stop the infections. Now I'd rather put bleach on my finger than boiling water, to be honest, but I don't want to be in that situation anyway where I have to make that kind of bad or worse choice. You should not be either. That's the reason I'm doing the program, because we need to think about solutions for these things. Supply chain is going to lock up if the perception of stability stops. That's the whole thing. This is the new play. So this whole Katoan narrative, like really how much power do we have? They have a couple hundred people trying to rule the entire planet, but in reality, it's about their perception. They consider themselves the rulers. That's why I come and I try to say, no. We're taking back our own sovereignty for our food, for our economy, for ourselves, for our families, for our communities. We don't need your central banking to come and tell us what to do, repo market man. This video is brought to you by our friends at TrueLeafMarket.com. Heirloom and organic seeds for any grow zone on our planet.